Alright, so let's get started with our geometry unit, and we're talking about perimeter. Example 1 is the figure that we see here with the 3, the 3.2, the 3.5, the 6.7, and the 3.8. Now, in order to solve this problem, all we really need is the help of our handy dandy calculator. So we just take each side and punch them in and we add them together. 3 plus 3.2 plus 3.5 plus 6.7 plus 3.8. Now, in general, when you're given answers, normally you're going to use the number of significant digits or the number of decimal places of each side in your question. And if you notice right here, each one of these sides has one place after the decimal, so that's what your answer is expected to have. So with precision, you're just going to go 20.2 centimeters, and that's all you have to do. Now with example 2, which is set up kind of like a grid where you're supposed to count how many blocks you have 9 blocks on this side and 2 blocks on that side, so you can count up the sides that way. You don't count up the number of blocks. The number of blocks is actually the area. So you take your calculator and you just add up the sides. 18 plus 4 is 22. 22 units. Alright, now let's move on to regular shapes like squares, rectangles, triangles. To find the perimeter of those shapes, we simply look at the pictures and we actually calculate those perimeters. So let's look at what we have in our notes. I'll put each one of the sides up here and we will find the perimeter just by adding up the sides. There are some formulas that make short work of this. Okay, so now we have our sides, but yours are much prettier because they're, right there on the paper. Alright, so if I want to find the distance around this shape, I can say 4 plus 2. And notice they didn't give me anything on the other side. When you have a rectangle, opposite sides are equal. So this side is 4 and this side is 2 as well. So you can just add them all up, or you could use this formula that I'm about to share with you. The perimeter of a rectangle is equal to 2 times the length plus the width. So since I have a 2 and a 4, I can add those together and get a 6, and then multiply that 6 times 2, because I have another 2 and a 2 and a 4. So my perimeter of this rectangle is 12. I'll put it inside. 12 feet. When you're just adding up units, your feet don't become square, they don't become cubed, they don't become to the fourth. You just add them on, just write it over there like a variable. It's 12 feet. Now with a square, all squares have the same length on all 4 sides. 5 miles, 5 miles, 5 miles, 5 miles. So in order to do this perimeter quickly, you can just say 4 times 5 miles. 4 times 5 is 20. That would be 20 miles. I'm really not as concerned about the units as I am the actual number, but I would like to see the unit written beside it. Now, this is an equilateral triangle, and equilateral triangles, kind of like squares, have all sides equal. And since there are 3 of them, you could do 3 times 10 dm, or decimeters, and you'll end up with 30 decimeters. Or if you're more comfortable with just adding up the sides, just go ahead and add up the sides. It's not a big deal. So 30 decimeters. And then with this whole right triangle here, this Pythagorean triple, 3, 4, 5, you just add them all up. 3 plus 4 is 7, and 7 plus 5 is 12. So your perimeter is 12 meters. And that's all you have to do there. So with figures that have corners, you just add up the sides. Now for a figure like a circle, there's some unique things that happen. We've got to deal with the fact that we don't have corners where we can add the sides. We have a curvy distance. The perimeter of a circle is called the circumference. The distance around the circle is called the circumference. So circumference can be written in terms of the radius, which is the segment that starts from the center and goes to the circle, or the diameter, which is a secant, or might I say a chord rather, that goes from one side of the circle through the center to the other side. And its circumference formula is pi times diameter. Now, the diameter is equal to 2 radiuses, and if you want to find the radius, you could just divide both sides by 2 and find out that the radius is equal to diameter divided by 2. Now let's calculate a few more problems. Alright, so looking at these 2 circles, the first one we have a diameter of 4 feet. So we're going to use the circumference formula that involves the diameter. Circumference is equal to pi times the diameter, and for all of our purposes, whenever we solve this problem, you can punch in for pi 3.14. So use that as the standard for pi. If you have a pi button and you are too lazy to type 3.14 and you want to hit the pi button, I will allow you to use that as well. Your answer will be slightly different than mine. It'll be off by a couple of decimal places, but I know what you did if you show me that you used the pi button, and I will know what your answer should be. So circumference is going to equal 3.14 times 4. So we punch that into our handy dandy calculator. 3.14 times 4, and we get 12.56. Now keep in mind there is no 2 decimal places here. You're welcome to write the 12.56. If it says round to the nearest foot, you could put 13, but 12.56 feet. It is not feet squared because we have 4 feet here, and 3.14 is just a common unit. It doesn't have any units. It's just the thing we use, like we use 1/2 when we're finding the area of a triangle. So feet. Now here we have the radius, and we're going to use the circumference formula for the radius, and we're going to plug in the 5 for r and 3.14 for pi. Now before we move on, let me show you with this one what happens when you just use the pi button. I can hit second, the caret key, and put the 4 in, multiplying it times 4, and I end up with 12.566. So it's just slightly different, so you'd end up with 12.57 if you round it to the nearest hundred. So it's just slightly different, so I do want you to know that. Now when we plug in the 5 here, we end up getting 31.4 meters, and that's all you have to do there. Now when it's time to do the next 2 problems, finding the distance around each one of the figures that we have, the perimeter of the figure, and it's not a whole circle but it's a half circle, we have to put in just a little bit of work. So let's take a look at this first one. Now circumference, of course, is all about the curved distance. This is circumference, the distance around that curve. How would we make it straight if we were trying to find out how many inches of wood we'd need for a circular staircase that's going down into our our downstairs, if we had that. Alright, so the circumference part deals with this part right here. But when I want to know the distance around the whole shape, let's say I was trying to install a pool in my backyard that's shaped like this, but I want to have a fence that goes around the perimeter of the pool and this part right here. So if I want the distance all around, not only do I want this curvy part, I want that straight part too. Now in this picture, based on what we know, this straight side is the diameter. And the curvy part right here, so I'm going to take the diameter and I'm going to add it to the curvy part, which happens to be pi times diameter divided by 2 because it's half of a circle. And that's what it says in the question, 1/2 of a circle. I'll always have to tell you how much of the circle you have. Is it a half? Is it a fourth? Is it an eighth? Is it a sixth? And that's what you multiply your circumference by, half times the circumference. So we plug in what we know. And what do we know? We know that the diameter is 2 dms. So you would do 2 plus 3.14 times 2 divided by 2. Now the one thing about multiplying and dividing by 2, they can kind of cancel each other out. So your answer here is going to be 5.14 decimeters. Again, looking at that, half of the perimeter plus the diameter, add those together and you end up with 5.14. Don't forget that straight part if you want to go all the way around the shape. Now we've got a pizza pie shape and we're still going all the way around it. But this time we've got the radius, so we use 2 pi r plus 2r because we got to deal with those 2 radiuses we have if we want to go all the way around this pizza pie. Maybe we want to make a plate that'll go around our pizza. And this is 1/8 of the circle, so we do 1/8 times the circumference to get that little yellow part right here, 2 pi r, and we plug in our radius of 30. 1/8 times 2 times 3.14 times 30 plus 60 is going to equal 83.55 centimeters. And that's all you have to do to work those problems. Good luck.